Okay, let's just jump right in. When we think about literature, we usually picture these old, dusty books on a shelf, right? Like it's a finished product. But the literature of the United Kingdom, it's something else entirely. It's not a closed book. It's a living, breathing, and honestly, a pretty argumentative story that's still being written today.
So, when I say British literature, what names pop into your head? Probably these ones, right? Shakespeare, Dickens, Jane Austen. They're the titans, the undisputed champions, kind of like the Mount Rushmore of the English language.
But what if I told you that's only one side of the story? A super important side, for sure, but focusing just on them is like looking at a single famous landmark and calling it the whole country. There's so much more going on.
And this right here, this really gets to the heart of it all. On one hand, you have this idea of a nice, tidy, unified canon of great works. But if you look closer, what you actually find is a fractured argument, a centuries-long debate between competing identities, between the center and the margins, between England and the other nations of the UK.
So that's what we're going to dig into, this idea of a fractured living canon, a body of work that's defined just as much by its internal fights as it is by its famous authors.
First things first, we got to get a key point straight. When we say British literature, it's not just another way of saying English literature. It's an umbrella term, one that has to cover the really distinct and often rebellious voices from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Honestly, understanding that distinction is crucial to getting the whole picture.
To see how this whole fractured story even began, we have to go way, way back to a time of mead halls and monsters, to find the foundational DNA of this literature.
Our earliest real glimpse is the epic poem Beowulf. And let me tell you, the language, Old English, is so alien, it's basically a foreign tongue to us now. But the themes it set up, incredibly important. This deep focus on blood, loyalty, and this sort of grim existential dread. It's a melancholic, introspective mood that you can feel haunting British writing even today.
And then the big bang happened. Shakespeare. If those early works gave the language its legs, Shakespeare taught it how to fly. The critic Harold Bloom put it perfectly, with this idea that Shakespeare invented the human. He created characters with such complicated inner lives, such psychological depth, that he fundamentally changed how we even understand ourselves.
So after Shakespeare, the central argument in British literature really shifted. For the next few hundred years, the big fight was between two powerful ideas: the needs of society versus the desires of the individual self.
First up, we have the Age of Reason. This was the Enlightenment, and its writers were like surgeons. They used sharp, rational satire as their scalpel to just dissect the absurdities of society. It was all about order, logic, and putting the social world right under a microscope. Of course, for every action, there's a reaction. And the pendulum didn't just swing back, it swung back violently. The Romantics saw the smokestacks of the Industrial Revolution and basically ran for the hills, literally. They totally rejected the cold logic of the city and found something divine in nature, in powerful emotions, and in the individual's imagination. It was a full-on revolt.
This brings us into the 19th century, an era you could describe as a story of supreme confidence, followed by an absolutely catastrophic collapse.
The Victorian era is the perfect example of this paradox. On the outside, the empire was projecting this unprecedented power across the globe. But its greatest novelists, people like Dickens and Eliot, they were obsessed with the condition of England, with exposing all the social rot and hypocrisy that was hiding right beneath that glittering surface.
And then, this. 1914, the start of the First World War. This single event just shattered that Victorian confidence. Completely. The old certainties, the idea that stories have a clear beginning, middle, and end, the belief in progress, all of it just became casualties of the trenches.
So how do you even write in a world that doesn't make sense anymore? Well, the response was modernism. Writers like Virginia Woolf and T.S. Eliot just broke all the old forms. They fractured time with nonlinear narratives. They gave us multiple competing voices all at once, and they turned their focus inward to the messy, chaotic reality of our own psychological experience.
This shattering of the old world led directly to where we are now, an era where the literature of the UK stopped being just an island story and became a truly global conversation.
After World War II, as the British Empire began to dismantle, a powerful new dynamic emerged. From all those former colonies, a new generation of writers started to write back to the center, using the English language to challenge and totally rewrite the old colonial stories.
And this happened incredibly fast. You have the arrival of the Windrush generation from the Caribbean bringing completely new voices and experiences. Then you get these landmark books like Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, which retold the history of India with magic and flair, and Zadie Smith's White Teeth, which just perfectly captured the vibrant, messy, multicultural reality of modern London. These writers didn't just join the conversation. They completely remade it.
So you see, the literature of the UK isn't some stone monument. It's a conversation. It's an unfinished book whose pages are still being filled by new voices with new stories to tell. Which, of course, leaves us with the big question: what on earth will the next chapter be about?